What would you do if you found out your own family planned a surprise party for your mother's 70th birthday and deliberately excluded you, not forgot to invite you, not assumed you were busy, but actually conspired to keep you away? Well, that's exactly what happened to me, and what I discovered next about my so-called loving family will shock you just as much as it shocked me. You know that feeling when you realize you've been erased from your own family, like you never existed at all. That's exactly what happened to me 3 weeks ago, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. My name is Avery Miller. I'm 35 years old, and I just found out that my own mother's 70th birthday party happened without me. Not because I was busy, not because I lived too far away, but because nobody thought to invite me. My own family literally planned an entire celebration and decided I didn't deserve to be there. But let me back up, because this story doesn't start with a birthday party. It starts in the suburbs of Cleveland, in a house where I learned very early that being the middle child meant being invisible. Picture this, a typical American family home, white picket fence, two-car garage, the works. Inside that picture-perfect house lived my older sister Greta, the golden child who could do no wrong, my baby brother Ethan, who got away with everything because he was the youngest, and then there was me, stuck right in the middle, fighting for scraps of attention, like some kind of emotional orphan. Greta was everything my parents wanted in a daughter. She was popular, she was beautiful, she played varsity volleyball, and she never challenged anyone about anything. She just smiled and nodded and collected praise like it was going out of style. Meanwhile, Ethan was the baby, the son they'd always dreamed of, the one who'd carry on the family name. And me? I was just there taking up space, apparently. I remember being 12 years old, sitting at our kitchen table doing homework while Greta got ready for another date, and Ethan played video games in the living room. Mom was making dinner, humming to herself completely, ignoring the fact that I'd been sitting there for 2 hours trying to get help with my math. When I finally asked her a question, she glanced over and said, "Oh, honey, you're so smart, you'll figure it out." Then she went right back to asking Greta about her weekend plans. That was my childhood in a nutshell, always being told I was so independent and so capable whenever I needed something while my siblings got the attention they craved. It's funny how being called independent can feel like punishment when you're just a kid who wants her mom to care. But here's the thing that makes this whole situation even more twisted. There were moments, real moments, when my mom showed up for me. And those moments, they're probably the reason I spent the next 20 years trying to earn her love. I was 8 years old when the first one happened. It was my birthday party, and I'd invited 12 kids from my class. You know how this story goes, right? 3 kids showed up. 3 out of 12. I was standing in our backyard looking at all the empty chairs and untouched party favors, trying not to cry in front of the few friends who had actually come. That's when my mom found me hiding behind the garden shed, sobbing my heart out. She didn't give me some speech about how those kids didn't matter or how I was better off without them. She just sat down in the dirt next to me in her good dress and held me while I cried. Then she whispered, "You know what? Let's make this the best party those 3 kids have ever been to." And she did. She turned on the sprinkler, brought out extra cake, and played freeze dance with us until we were all laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. For one afternoon, I felt like the most important person in the world to her. The second moment happened when I was 14. I'd been working on this science fair project for months. It was about renewable energy, and I was convinced I was going to change the world with my presentation. When the results came in, I got second place. Not first. Second, I was devastated. All the other parents were congratulating the first place winner, and I was standing there feeling like a complete failure. But then I heard my mom's voice cutting through the crowd. "That's my daughter, second place in the entire school." She was beaming like I'd just won the Nobel Prize. She took me out for ice cream afterward and told me how proud she was of me for working so hard. For that one day, I felt like maybe I was her favorite after all. The third moment was the one that really got me. I turned 16, and just like when I was 8, hardly anyone showed up to my party. By then, I'd gotten used to disappointment, but it still stung. I was sitting in my room afterward, pretending to read, but really just feeling sorry for myself, when Mom knocked on my door. "Get dressed," she said. "We're going to New York." "What, Mom? It's like 8 o'clock at night." "So you wanted a sweet 16 to remember, right?" She drove us 2 hours to the city that night, just the two of us, and took me to see The Lion King on Broadway. We got tickets from a scalper, paid way too much, and sat in the very back of the theater. But I didn't care. My mom had dropped everything, spent money we probably didn't have, and driven to another state just to make me feel special. Sitting in that dark theater, watching the lights dance across the stage, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment our relationship would change. Maybe she'd finally see me the way I desperately wanted to be seen. Those 3 moments became like sacred memories to me. Whenever things got bad with my family, whenever I felt invisible or forgotten, I'd think about those times when my mom chose me, when she made me feel like I mattered. But here's what I didn't understand. Then those moments weren't the rule. They were the exception. And exceptions don't make up for years of being overlooked. As we got older, the dynamic in our house became even more obvious. Greta stayed close to home, went to community college, and eventually joined my dad's real estate business. She was the responsible one, the one who helped with family dinners, and remembered everyone's birthdays, and made sure my parents felt loved and appreciated. Ethan went to Ohio State on a partial football scholarship, studied business, and moved back home after graduation. He was the successful son, the one who'd eventually take over the family business and give my parents grandchildren. And me, I was the one who left. I was the one who got a full scholarship to NYU, moved to Manhattan, and built a life 2 states away. I was the one who climbed the corporate ladder, who worked 70-hour weeks, who earned a 6-figure salary before I turned 30. I was the one who made something of myself. But according to my family, I was also the one who abandoned them. It started small, little comments here and there. "Oh, Avery's too busy for family dinner. Avery's got her fancy New York life now. I guess we're not important enough for Avery anymore." The thing is, I tried. God, I tried so hard to stay connected. I called every week. I sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts. I invited them to visit me in the city. I offered to fly them out to Boston when I got promoted to VP. I made an effort, but somehow it was never enough. And Greta was always there to make sure everyone knew it wasn't enough. "It's nice that Avery sent Mom flowers," she'd say during family phone calls. "But flowers don't help when Mom needs someone to drive her to doctor's appointments." Sure, Avery makes good money, but money can't replace actually being here for family. I think Avery feels guilty about leaving, so she tries to buy our forgiveness with expensive gifts. Every conversation became a competition I didn't even know I was participating in. Greta positioned herself as the devoted daughter, the one who sacrificed her dreams for family, while I became the selfish sister who chose career over everything else. The worst part, I started to believe it. I started to think, maybe I was selfish. Maybe I should have stayed in Cleveland. Maybe success wasn't worth losing my family over. But I couldn't go back. I'd built something real, something important, something that mattered. I was good at my job. I was respected. I was making a difference in the world. Why should I have to give that up to prove I loved my family? So I kept trying to bridge the gap from a distance. I kept calling, kept sending gifts, kept hoping that somehow, someway, they'd see that leaving home didn't mean I'd stopped loving them. I should have known better. I should have seen the signs. But when you love someone, really love them, you keep hoping things will change. You keep believing that this time will be different. That's how I ended up here 3 weeks later, trying to make sense of how my own mother's milestone birthday happened without me even knowing about it, And that's where this story really begins. Looking back now, I can see exactly when things started to shift. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was subtle, like watching someone slowly turn down the volume on a song you love until one day you realize you can barely hear it anymore. It started with the phone calls. For years, my mom and I had our Sunday routine. Every week, without fail, we'd talk for at least an hour. She'd tell me about her week, I'd tell her about mine, and for those 60 minutes, it felt like we were close again. Like distance didn't matter. But somewhere around last spring, those calls started getting shorter. What used to be an hour became 45 minutes, then 30, then 20, and the tone changed too. Instead of the warm, rambling conversations we used to have, Mom started sounding distracted, like she was doing something else while we talked. "Oh, honey, I should go," she'd say, right in the middle of me telling her about a big presentation I'd given. "Greta's here and she needs help with something." Or, "Can I call you back later? Your father and I are going to look at houses with Greta." At first, I told myself it was normal. Greta lived 5 minutes away. Of course she was around more. Of course she needed more immediate attention. But then, I started noticing something else. Sometimes right before Mom would cut our conversation short, I'd hear Greta's voice in the background. "Mom, are you still on the phone with Avery? I thought we were going to discuss the kitchen renovation." "Tell Avery I said hi, but we really need to focus on this family stuff." Family stuff. As if I wasn't family. As if my life updates and work achievements were just casual chatter that could be postponed indefinitely. The breaking point came during one of our forced family Zoom calls. You know how it is with families that live in different time zones, right? Someone decides we all need to stay connected and schedules these awkward video calls where everyone sits around trying to think of things to say. I was in my Boston apartment sitting at my kitchen counter with my laptop, genuinely excited to see everyone's faces. I'd just gotten a promotion at work, and I was hoping to share the news. Ethan was calling in from his apartment in Cleveland. Mom and Dad were at their house, and Greta was there with them, of course. We'd been talking for maybe 15 minutes, mostly small talk about the weather, and Ethan's job when I mentioned my promotion. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom said, but her smile looked forced. "Vice President, that's very impressive." "Thanks, Mom. It's been a lot of hard work, but I'm really excited about the new responsibilities. And that's great for you, Avery." Greta interrupted, and I could hear that tone. That special tone she reserved for moments when she wanted to remind everyone that I was the outsider. Some of us are actually here helping Mom and Dad with real things, not managing people from a glass tower. The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at my screen, watching my family's faces, waiting for someone to say something. Waiting for Mom to tell Greta that was uncalled for. Waiting for Dad to change the subject. Waiting for Ethan to make a joke to break the tension. But nobody said anything. They just sat there, and in that silence, I realized something that made my stomach drop. They agreed with her. Maybe they didn't like how she'd said it, but they agreed with the sentiment. I was the daughter who'd chosen ambition over family. I was the sister who thought she was too good for small-town life. I was the one who'd abandoned them for a corner office and a 6-figure salary. That's when I understood that somewhere along the way, my family had rewritten our story. In their version, I wasn't the daughter who'd worked her way through college and built a successful career. I wasn't the sister who called every week and sent thoughtful gifts and tried to stay connected despite the distance. In their version, I was the selfish one. The one who'd gotten too big for her britches, the one who'd forgotten where she came from. And Greta was the hero of their story. She was the daughter who'd stayed, the one who'd sacrificed her dreams for family, the one who was there for every doctor's appointment and family dinner and crisis. The thing is, that narrative wasn't entirely wrong. Greta had stayed. She had been there for things I couldn't be there for. But what hurt was how they'd turned my success into a character flaw, how they'd made my achievements feel like betrayals. After that Zoom call, I started paying closer attention to the family dynamics. I started noticing how often Greta's voice was in the background during my phone calls with Mom. I started seeing how my gifts and gestures were received with polite thank yous instead of genuine appreciation. I started realizing that somewhere along the way I'd become a guest in my own family, but I kept trying. God help me, I kept trying. When Thanksgiving rolled around, I decided to make one more effort. I flew home to Cleveland, took 4 days off work, and showed up with an expensive bottle of wine and homemade cranberry sauce from a recipe I'd found in some fancy food magazine. I should have known it was going to be a disaster when I walked into my parents' house, and Greta was already there wearing an apron, pulling a perfect turkey out of the oven, like she was starring in some Norman Rockwell painting. "Oh, Avery made it," she said, not even looking up from the turkey. "How nice that you could fit us into your busy schedule." "I took vacation days to be here," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "I wouldn't miss Thanksgiving." "Right, because one day a year is all the family time you can manage." Mom appeared from the dining room carrying a stack of plates. "Girls, please, it's Thanksgiving. Let's just have a nice family dinner." But Greta wasn't done. She never was. Throughout the meal, she made little comments, little digs. When I mentioned a project I was working on, she said, "Must be nice to worry about corporate problems instead of real-world issues." When I complimented the stuffing, she said, "Thanks. It's Mom's recipe. You know, the one from when we were kids. Back when you lived here." I tried to ignore it. I tried to focus on Mom and Dad and Ethan to have normal conversations about normal things. But Greta kept circling back like a shark that smelled blood in the water. The explosion happened after dinner when we were all sitting in the living room. Dad was watching football. Mom was knitting. Ethan was on his phone, and I was just trying to enjoy being in the same room as my family for the first time in months. That's when Greta decided to go for the kill. "You know what? I don't understand, Avery," she said, setting down her coffee cup with a little too much force. "How you can sit here acting like nothing's changed when you've basically abandoned this family." "Greta," Mom warned, but she didn't sound very convincing. "No, Mom. Somebody needs to say it. She shows up once or twice a year, sends some expensive gifts to make herself feel better, and then disappears back to her fancy life. Meanwhile, who's here when you need help? Who drove you to the hospital when you had that scare last month? Who helped Dad when he hurt his back? It wasn't Miss Corporate Executive." My blood was boiling, but I kept my voice calm. I didn't know about Mom's hospital visit, because nobody told me. I would have been here if I'd known. "Would you really? Or would you have been too busy with some important meeting?" "That's not fair, Greta. What's not fair is pretending like success makes you better than the rest of us. What's not fair is acting like the family that raised you isn't good enough for you anymore." That's when I snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but something inside me just broke. "You want to know what's not fair," I said, standing up from the couch. "What's not fair is being punished for making something of myself. What's not fair is being made to feel guilty for building a life I'm proud of. I didn't abandon this family, Greta. I built my life. I didn't inherit it." The room went dead silent. Dad turned off the TV. Mom stopped knitting. Ethan actually looked up from his phone. "What's that supposed to mean?" Greta demanded. "It means I worked for everything I have. It means I earned my success instead of staying home and taking the easy path." "Easy path." Greta's voice got high and sharp. "You think staying here and taking care of our parents is easy. You think working for Dad and never getting to follow my own dreams is easy. Then why did you do it?" I shot back. "Why did you stay if you're so miserable?" "Because somebody had to. Because somebody had to be responsible while you were off playing corporate princess." "Girls, that's enough," Dad said. But I was past caring about keeping the peace. "I never asked you to sacrifice anything for me," I said to Greta. "I never asked you to stay home and take care of our parents. You made that choice. Don't blame me for making a different one. A selfish one. A brave one." The silence that followed was the kind that changes everything. You know what I mean? One of those moments where you say something you can't take back and everyone in the room knows that nothing will ever be the same again. I looked around at my family. Greta was staring at me with pure hatred. Mom looked disappointed and hurt. Ethan looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to disappear. And Dad looked tired. "I think," he said slowly, That you should go. 5 words. That's all it took to erase 35 years of being part of this family. Fine, I said, grabbing my purse and my coat. Maybe I will. I walked out of that house, knowing I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I'd said things that couldn't be unsaid. I'd burned bridges that couldn't be rebuilt. But here's the thing that really got to me as I sat in my rental car in their driveway, hands shaking as I tried to start the engine. I realized that nobody had followed me out. Nobody had tried to stop me from leaving. Nobody had said, "Wait, let's talk about this." They just let me go. And in that moment, I understood that the story they'd been writing about me was already finished. I was already the villain in their narrative, the selfish daughter who thought she was too good for her family. The drive back to Boston that night was the longest 4 hours of my life. And that Thanksgiving dinner, that was the last time I spoke to any of them until I found out about Mom's birthday party. Well, until I found out I wasn't invited to Mom's birthday party. 6 months, that's how long the silence lasted after Thanksgiving. 6 months of no phone calls, no texts, no contact whatsoever. I told myself I was fine with it. I told myself maybe we all needed space to cool down. I told myself that eventually someone would reach out and we'd figure out how to move forward. I should have known better. It was a Tuesday evening in April when my world shifted again. I was at home in Boston, still in my work clothes, scrolling through Instagram while eating leftover Chinese takeout. You know how it is when you're mindlessly swiping through social media, not really paying attention to anything. That's exactly what I was doing when I saw it. Emily Patterson, Ethan's fiancée. I followed her because she seemed sweet the few times I'd met her, and she occasionally posted cute photos of her and Ethan together. But this post wasn't about Ethan. It was a photo of a beautifully decorated private dining room at some upscale restaurant I didn't recognize. Elegant floral arrangements, soft lighting tables set with fine china and crystal glasses. The caption read, "Such a beautiful celebration for Patricia Miller's 70th birthday. So honored to be here with family." I stared at my phone screen, reading those words over and over again, waiting for them to make sense. Patricia Miller, my mother, 70th birthday, family celebration. And I wasn't there. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through Emily's other posts from that day. There was a photo of her and Ethan getting ready, him in a nice suit, her in a gorgeous navy dress. Another picture of the whole family gathered around a massive birthday cake, Mom in the center, wearing a beautiful pearl necklace I'd never seen before. Everyone smiling and laughing. Greta was there with her husband. Dad was there in his best blazer. Ethan and Emily. Even some extended family I recognized, aunts and uncles and cousins. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. I felt like I was going to throw up. This wasn't some casual family dinner I'd missed. This was a milestone birthday. My mother's 70th birthday, and they'd planned an entire celebration without me. Not only had they not invited me, they hadn't even told me it was happening. I immediately called Mom. My fingers were shaking so badly I could barely dial her number. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. "Oh, Avery," she said, and her voice sounded strange. "Guilty, maybe. How are you, sweetheart?" "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just saw Emily's Instagram post about your birthday party." Silence. Long, horrible silence. "Mom?" "Oh, that," she said, and I could hear her moving around, probably walking to another room where the rest of the family couldn't hear her. "Yes, we had a little celebration." "A little celebration, Mom? It looked like a pretty big party." "Well, you know how these things go. Greta organized everything, and you know how she is when she gets an idea in her head." "Why wasn't I invited?" Another pause. "Oh, honey, Greta handled all the invitations. She thought you had that big product launch you were working on. You're always so busy with work, and we didn't want to interfere with your important projects." I felt like she'd slapped me. "Mom, I would have dropped everything to be there. It's your 70th birthday. Of course I would have wanted to be there." "I know, sweetheart. I know. It all happened so fast, and Greta was managing everything, and I think she just assumed you wouldn't be able to make it with your schedule and everything." So you didn't think to call me yourself? You didn't think to check if I could come to my own mother's birthday party? Avery, please don't be upset. It was just family. Just family. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Because what was I, if not family? I am family, Mom. Of course you are, honey. Of course you are. Look, maybe we can do something special, just the two of us, next time you're in town. We could go to lunch, just us girls. Next time I'm in town, like I was some distant relative who occasionally visited, not her daughter who called every week for 20 years. Mom, this was your 70th birthday. This was a once-in-a-lifetime celebration, and I missed it because nobody thought to include me. Sweetheart, I don't want to fight about this. What's done is done. What's done is done. That's when I knew. That's when I understood that this wasn't a mistake or an oversight. This was a choice. They had chosen to celebrate without me. They had chosen to exclude me from one of the most important moments in my mother's life. You're right, I said quietly. What's done is done. After I hung up, I sat on my couch staring at Emily's Instagram posts for another hour. I studied every detail of every photo, looking for clues about how long they'd been planning this. The decorations were too elaborate for something last minute. The guest list was too extensive for something thrown together quickly. This had been in the works for weeks, maybe months. And in all that time, not one person in my family had thought to pick up the phone and ask if I wanted to be there. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about all the birthday celebrations I'd missed over the years because of distance and work commitments. I thought about all the times I'd sent gifts instead of showing up in person. I thought about how maybe somehow I'd given them the impression that I didn't care about family gatherings. But this was different. This was my mother's 70th birthday. If there was ever an event I would have moved heaven and earth to attend, it was this one. And they knew it. Deep down, they had to know it. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine and wait for them to reach out when they felt like it. I was going to show up. I called my assistant as soon as I got to work and asked her to book me a flight to Cleveland for the weekend. I didn't have a plan exactly, but I needed to see my mother face to face. I needed to understand how we'd gotten to this point, and I needed to try to fix it if it could be fixed. Then I started thinking about a gift. What do you bring to the birthday party you weren't invited to? What kind of present says, I'm hurt that you excluded me, but I still love you and want to make this right? I remembered something from my childhood. When I was little, maybe 7 or 8, my mom had this music box that played for Elise. It was this delicate little thing with a tiny ballerina that spun around when you opened it. She kept it on her dresser, and sometimes when I was having trouble sleeping, she'd wind it up and let me watch the ballerina dance while the music played. I'd always loved that music box, but it had broken when I was in high school. The ballerina's arm snapped off and the music mechanism stopped working. Mom was so sad about it, but we never got it fixed. Eventually it disappeared, probably thrown away or donated. I spent my lunch break scouring antique shops online until I found something similar. Not exactly the same, but close. A vintage music box from the 1960s. Beautiful craftsmanship with a ballerina that actually looked like the one from my childhood memories. It was expensive, but I didn't care. I had it expedited to Boston, and it arrived Friday afternoon. That night, I packed carefully. I wanted to look nice, but not overdressed. Professional, but not like I was trying to show off. I settled on a black wrap dress with a blazer, the kind of outfit that would work for a nice restaurant or a family gathering. Conservative, but elegant. I was planning to surprise them to show up and hope for the best. But Saturday morning, as I was getting ready to leave for the airport, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Greta. Hope you're not planning to crash Mom's birthday weekend. The party was last week, in case you forgot. I stared at that message for a long time. The casual cruelty of it. The assumption that I'd seen the Instagram posts and was planning some kind of revenge. The word crash, like I was some uninvited stranger trying to force my way into their celebration. But what really got to me was the phrase, In case you forgot. Like I was so self-absorbed and careless that I'd forgotten my own mother's birthday. Like I was the kind of daughter who needed reminders about important family events. I typed and deleted about 10 different responses. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought about her handling of the invitations. I wanted to ask her why she felt the need to be the gatekeeper of our family. I wanted to explain that I wasn't trying to crash anything. I was trying to salvage what was left of my relationship with our mother. But in the end, I didn't respond at all. I just grabbed my suitcase and headed to the airport. Because here's the thing, I wasn't going to Cleveland to crash a party or cause drama or prove a point. I was going because my mother had turned 70 years old, and I wanted to wish her a happy birthday in person. I was going because sometimes when your family gives up on you, you don't give up on them. I was going because I still had hope that maybe we could find our way back to each other. Looking back now, I realize how naive that was. But hope makes you do crazy things sometimes. And showing up to your mother's birthday weekend uninvited and unwanted, that's definitely crazy. But I was about to discover that sometimes crazy is exactly what you need to do to find out where you really stand with the people you love. The Lakewood Country Club was exactly the kind of place my family would choose for a milestone celebration. Elegant, traditional, expensive. The kind of place that says, we've made it without being too flashy about it. As my Uber pulled up the circular driveway, I could see guests through the tall windows of the main dining room, people in cocktail attire chatting and laughing. For a moment, sitting in the back of that car, I felt like I was 8 years old again, getting dropped off at a birthday party where I wasn't sure I'd be welcomed. My palms were sweating, and I had to take 3 deep breaths before I could even open the car door. "You sure this is the right place?" the driver asked, probably picking up on my hesitation. "Yeah," I said, grabbing my purse and the carefully wrapped music box. "This is it." The late afternoon sun was casting golden light across the lake, and everything looked picture perfect, like a scene from a magazine about perfect families having perfect celebrations. I smoothed down my dress, checked my reflection in the car window, and walked toward the entrance with as much confidence as I could muster. The first person I recognized was my cousin Janet, who was standing near the entrance talking to someone I didn't know. When she saw me, her face went through this whole progression of emotions. Surprise, confusion, and then something that looked almost like panic. "Avery," she said loud enough that several other people turned to look. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for Mom's birthday," I said, trying to sound casual. "Sorry I'm late." Janet glanced nervously toward the main dining room. "Oh, we didn't know you were coming." That's when I knew for sure. It wasn't just that they hadn't invited me. They'd actively told people I wouldn't be there. The guests had been informed that Avery wouldn't be attending Patricia Miller's 70th birthday celebration. I was still processing that humiliation when I saw my father walking toward me. Dad has always been a big man, broad shoulders and a commanding presence, but I'd never seen him use that presence against me before. As he approached, everything about his body language said, "Stop." "Avery," he said, and his voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "What are you doing here?" "I came to wish Mom a happy birthday," I said, holding up the gift box. I know I wasn't formally invited, but I hoped I could at least say hello and give her this. Dad positioned himself directly in front of me, blocking my path to the entrance. "You're not on the guest list." Those words hit me like a physical blow. "You're not on the guest list." "Not, there was a mix-up, or we didn't think you could make it." Just a flat final statement that I didn't belong there. "Dad, it's Mom's birthday. I'm her daughter." "You're also the daughter who walked out on Thanksgiving and hasn't spoken to any of us since." "Because you told me to leave. Because you insulted your sister and made it clear you think you're better than all of us." I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes, but I blinked them back. I would not cry in front of the country club guests who were now openly staring at this family drama unfolding in their elegant lobby. "I don't think I'm better than anyone," I said quietly. "I just think I deserve to know about my mother's birthday party." That's when Greta appeared, seeming to materialize out of nowhere, like some kind of evil fairy godmother. She was wearing a beautiful emerald green dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, look," she said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Avery decided to show up after all." "I came to see Mom," I said, trying to ignore the way my sister was looking at me like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. "Mom's under enough stress today without having to deal with family drama," Greta said. "This is supposed to be a celebration, not a therapy session." "I'm not here to cause drama. I just want to wish her a happy birthday." "Right. And if she'd wanted you here, don't you think she would have invited you herself?" The cruelty of that statement took my breath away. Because the worst part was it might have been true. Maybe Mom really hadn't wanted me there. Maybe the daughter who'd once driven to New York City just to take me to a Broadway show had finally given up on me completely. "Look," Dad said, his voice slightly softer but still firm. "This isn't the time or place for this conversation. We're in the middle of a party." "I understand," I said, and I was proud of how steady my voice sounded. "I don't want to disrupt anything. Could you just give this to Mom and tell her I came to wish her a happy birthday?" I held out the carefully wrapped music box, and for a moment I thought Dad might take it. He looked at the box, then at me, and something flickered across his face. Maybe regret. Maybe just exhaustion. But then Greta stepped forward. "I don't think that's a good idea. Mom doesn't need reminders of family members who can't be bothered to show up when they're actually wanted." "Greta," Dad said, a warning in his voice. "No, Dad, someone needs to say it. She doesn't get to waltz in here with an expensive gift and expect everything to be forgiven. She made her choice when she decided her career was more important than family." I looked at my father, waiting for him to defend me. Waiting for him to tell Greta she was being unfair. Waiting for him to remember that I was his daughter too, and I deserved basic human dignity even if I'd made mistakes. But he didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking tired and uncomfortable, while his golden daughter dismantled whatever was left of our relationship. "You're right," I said finally. "I made my choice, and apparently, so have all of you." I turned around and walked away. I didn't run. I didn't storm off. I didn't make a scene. I just walked away with as much dignity as I could manage while my heart was breaking into pieces inside my chest. The thing about rejection is that it has this way of making you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. As I walked across that parking lot, I found myself wondering if they were right. Maybe I had been selfish. Maybe I had prioritized my career over family. Maybe I deserved to be excluded from the celebration. I made it to my rental car before the tears started. I sat in the driver's seat still holding that stupid music box and finally let myself fall apart. Not the dramatic sobbing kind of crying you see in movies. Just quiet, devastating tears that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside my chest. I thought about all the birthdays I'd celebrated alone in my Boston apartment, ordering takeout and calling to wish family members well from hundreds of miles away. I thought about all the holidays I'd spent working, telling myself that success was worth the sacrifice. I thought about the little girl who'd once believed her mom would always be there to comfort her when the world was cruel. That little girl had been wrong about a lot of things. I was just starting to pull myself together, wiping my face with tissues from my purse and trying to figure out what to do next when I heard a knock on my passenger side window. My first thought was that it was probably Dad coming to apologize, or at least to try to smooth things over. My second thought was that it might be Greta coming to deliver one final insult. I wasn't sure which option would be worse, but when I looked up, I saw a young woman I barely recognized. Blonde hair, kind eyes, probably in her late 20s. She was wearing a navy blue dress that looked familiar, and it took me a moment to place her. Emily, Ethan's fiancée, the one whose Instagram post had started this whole nightmare. I rolled down the window, not sure what to expect. "Avery," she said, and her voice was gentle, concerned. "Are you okay?" What a question! Was I okay I'd just been turned away from my own mother's birthday party by my own father? I'd been publicly humiliated by my sister in front of a room full of people who'd known me since I was a child. I was sitting in a parking lot crying over a music box that would probably never be given to the person it was meant for. "I'm fine," I lied. Emily looked at me for a long moment, then glanced back toward the country club. "Can I get in? I think we need to talk." Emily slid into the passenger seat and closed the door, creating this little bubble of quiet in the middle of what felt like the worst day of my life. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. She was looking at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Sympathy, maybe, but something else too. Something that looked almost like determination. "I had to talk to you," she said finally. "Look, Emily, I appreciate whatever this is, but I should probably just go back to my hotel and catch an early flight home. I clearly shouldn't have come." "No," she said, and there was something fierce in her voice that made me really look at her for the first time. "You absolutely should have come, and the fact that they tried to keep you away is exactly why I need to tell you something." I wiped my eyes with another tissue. "Tell me what—" Emily took a deep breath, like she was preparing herself for something big. "Avery, I work at Technova Solutions in Boston." I blinked at her, confused. "Okay, I work for you. You're my mentor." The words hit me like a lightning bolt. I stared at her, my brain struggling to process what she'd just said. Emily Patterson. Emily Patterson from the mentorship program. The brilliant young developer who'd been assigned to me 6 months ago. The one who'd impressed everyone with her innovative approach to user interface design. The one I'd been working with every week, helping her navigate her first major project at a tech company. "You're Emily Patterson," I said slowly. "I'm Emily Patterson," she confirmed. "And you're Avery Miller, the VP who took a chance on a small-town girl with big ideas and helped her believe she could actually make it in tech." I felt like my entire world had shifted sideways. "But you're Ethan's fiancée." "I am, and until last month I had no idea that my mentor, the woman I admire more than almost anyone in the world, was also my fiancée's sister." How is that possible?" Emily laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Because your family never talks about you. Not in any meaningful way. I knew Ethan had 2 sisters. But whenever I asked about them, he'd just say Greta worked with your dad, and Avery lived in Boston and worked in tech. That was it. No details, no stories, nothing that would have made me connect the dots." I was still trying to wrap my head around this revelation. "But my last name is Miller. Ethan's last name is Miller. Do you know how many Millers work in tech? I never made the connection. And honestly, based on how your family talks about you, I pictured someone completely different." "How do they talk about me?" Emily's expression darkened. "Like you're this cold, career-obsessed person who abandoned her family for money and success. Like you're someone who thinks she's too good for where she came from." The confirmation of what I'd suspected hurt, but it wasn't really a surprise. "And what do you think—" "I think," Emily said, leaning forward in her seat, "that you're one of the most supportive, encouraging, and genuinely caring people I've ever worked with. I think you're the reason I didn't quit my job during my first month when I felt completely overwhelmed. I think you're the person who saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself." I felt fresh tears starting. "Emily, do you remember what you told me during our 3rd mentoring session when I was having that meltdown about the Morrison project?" I did remember. Emily had been convinced she wasn't smart enough or experienced enough to handle a major client presentation. She'd been ready to ask for reassignment. "I told you that imposter syndrome was just fear wearing a fancy disguise," I said. "And then you said that the fact that I cared so much about doing good work was proof that I belonged there. You said caring was a superpower, not a weakness." "It is. You changed my life with that conversation. You made me believe I could be successful without giving up who I am. And that's when I realized something was very, very wrong with how your family sees you." Emily glanced toward the country club, then back at me. Avery, I need to tell you something else. Something I overheard last night. What do you mean? Ethan and I went to your parents' house for dinner yesterday. You know, pre-party family time. I was in the bathroom, and when I came out, I heard Greta and your dad talking in the kitchen. My stomach dropped. What were they saying? They were planning this. They were literally discussing how to handle it if you showed up today. Greta said she was sure you'd try to make it all about yourself by crashing the party. Your dad said he'd handle it if you came. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that I felt physically sick. They planned to turn me away. They did. And Avery, your mom, wasn't part of that conversation. She was in the living room with Ethan looking through old photo albums. Half the pictures were of you. She kept smiling at them and telling stories about when you were little. But she didn't invite me herself. Because Greta told her you were too busy. Because Greta has been filtering your relationship with your parents for years, and they don't even realize it's happening. I sat there for a moment, processing everything Emily had just told me. The woman who'd become one of my closest professional relationships was my brother's fiancée. My family had been systematically poisoned against me by my own sister, and my mother, who I'd been convinced had given up on me, was looking at old pictures and telling stories about my childhood just last night. What do I do with this information? I asked. Emily looked at me with the same determination I'd seen in her work presentations. You come inside with me. You give your mom that gift, and you let her decide for herself whether or not she wants you at her birthday party. Emily, I can't. You saw what just happened. They'll cause a scene. Then we'll cause a bigger one. I stared at her. What do you mean? I'm going to walk back in there, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you mean to me. I'm going to make it very difficult for your family to paint you as the villain when there's a room full of people who will hear a different story. I can't ask you to do that. It'll cause problems with Ethan. Ethan loves me. And if he loves me, he needs to understand that standing by while his family treats my mentor like garbage is not acceptable. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand. Avery, you taught me that I don't have to choose between being successful and being a good person. You taught me that I can be ambitious and still be kind. Let me return the favor. I looked at the music box still sitting in my lap, then at Emily's determined face, then toward the country club where my mother was celebrating without me. How would we even get back in there? Dad made it pretty clear I'm not welcome. Emily smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen all day. Have you ever noticed that fancy venues like this always have multiple entrances? Staff, entrances, patio doors, emergency exits. I saw a side door when I came out to find you. You want us to sneak in. I want us to walk in with dignity and confidence just through a different door. And then I want you to give your mother her gift and let her make her own decision about whether you belong at her party. For the first time since I'd arrived in Cleveland, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone. Here was someone who knew me, really knew me, and thought I was worth fighting for. Someone who understood that the story my family had been telling about me wasn't the whole truth. Okay, I said, surprising myself. Let's do it, Emily grinned. Now you're talking. But first, fix your makeup. We're going to make an entrance. 5 minutes later, we were walking around the side of the building like we owned the place. Emily had been right about the side entrance. There was a door that led directly into the main dining room, probably used by catering staff. Through the glass, I could see the party in full swing. My mother was sitting at the head table laughing at something someone had said. She looked beautiful and happy, and for a moment I almost lost my nerve. Ready, Emily whispered. I clutched the music box tighter and nodded. Emily opened the door and walked in first, with me right behind her. It took a few seconds for people to notice us, but when they did, the conversation started dying out in waves. By the time we'd made it halfway across the room, the entire party had gone quiet. I saw Greta's face go white. I saw my dad start to move toward us. I saw Ethan's confused expression as he tried to figure out why his fiancée was walking across the room with his supposedly estranged sister. But before anyone else could react, Emily stepped forward and raised her voice so everyone could hear her. "Excuse me, everyone," she said, projecting like she was giving a business presentation. "I'd like to introduce someone very special. This is Avery Miller, Patricia's daughter, and also my mentor and one of the most remarkable women I know." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see people looking back and forth between Emily and me, trying to understand what was happening. I could see Greta's face turning red with embarrassment and anger. I could see my dad frozen in place, clearly unsure of how to handle this very public situation. But most importantly, I could see my mother's face. And what I saw there wasn't disappointment or annoyance. It was pure, undiluted joy. "Avery," she said, standing up from her chair. "Avery, you came..." She started walking toward me, and suddenly I was 12 years old again, running to my mom for comfort after a bad day at school. I met her halfway across the room, and when she wrapped her arms around me, I felt like I could breathe again for the first time in months. "Happy birthday, Mom," I whispered, holding her tight. "I can't believe you're here," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "I was so hoping you'd come." That's when the anger hit me. Not the explosive, dramatic kind, but a cold, clear fury that cut through all the confusion and hurt. I pulled back from my mom's embrace and looked directly at my father, who was still standing there, looking like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. "Mom," I said loud enough for everyone to hear. "I flew in from Boston just for this. Dad told me I wasn't on the guest list and that I wasn't welcome. Is that what you wanted?" The look of shock and horror that crossed my mother's face was all the answer I needed. "No," she said, her voice shaking. "Absolutely not. What are you talking about? Of course you're welcome. You're my daughter." And that's when everything started to unravel. What happened next was something I'd only seen in movies. You know that moment when the facade finally cracks and everyone's real feelings come spilling out? That's exactly what happened in the middle of my mother's 70th birthday party, in front of 50 shocked guests who suddenly found themselves witnessing a family implosion. "Patricia," my dad said, his voice strained, "we should discuss this privately." "No," Mom said, and there was steel in her voice I hadn't heard in years. "I want to discuss this right now. How is it possible that my daughter flew here from Boston for my birthday and was told she wasn't welcome at my own party?" The room was so quiet you could hear the lake water lapping against the shore outside. Every guest was staring at us, but Mom didn't seem to care. She was looking back and forth between Dad and Greta with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something deeper, disappointment maybe, or betrayal. "Can we please take this somewhere private?" Greta said, glancing nervously at all the watching faces. "Fine," Mom said, "but we're settling this tonight." The club manager appeared out of nowhere, probably sensing the need for damage control, and quickly ushered us into a small conference room off the main dining area. Mom, Dad, Greta, Ethan, Emily, and me. 6 people who shared blood and history, and apparently a whole lot of misunderstanding. Once the door closed, Mom turned to face all of us, and I could see her hands shaking slightly, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I want answers," she said. "Right now, Avery, tell me exactly what happened when you got here." So I did. I told her about finding out about the party through Emily's Instagram post, about calling her and being told Greta had handled the invitations, about Dad blocking me at the entrance and being told I wasn't on the guest list, about Greta saying she was under enough stress without dealing with family drama. With every detail I shared, Mom's face got paler. When I finished, she turned to Dad. "Is this true? Robert?" Dad looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Patricia, it's complicated." "It's not complicated. It's a yes or no question. Did you tell our daughter she wasn't welcome at my birthday party?" "I told her she wasn't on the guest list." "Because she wasn't on the guest list, or because you decided she shouldn't be?" Dad looked at Greta, and that look told me everything I needed to know. This had been planned, coordinated. They'd made a conscious decision to exclude me from my mother's milestone birthday. "Answer me, Robert." "We thought it would be easier," Dad said finally. "After Thanksgiving, after all the fighting, we thought it would be better for everyone if we kept things simple." by excluding my daughter, by avoiding more conflict on your special day. Mom was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was dangerous. So you decided without asking me that I would rather celebrate my 70th birthday without one of my children than risk having a difficult conversation. Mom, Greta interrupted. You don't understand how hard this has been. She left us. She chose her career over family, and then she shows up occasionally acting like nothing's changed. It's not fair to you. What's not fair to me? Mom said, turning to face Greta, is having my children make decisions about my life without consulting me. What's not fair is finding out that my daughter has been kept away from family events because you decided I couldn't handle seeing her. That's not what happened, Greta protested. Then what did happen? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been managing my relationships with my own children. That's when the dam broke. Greta's carefully controlled facade crumbled, and suddenly she wasn't the golden daughter anymore. She was just a tired, overwhelmed woman who'd been carrying too much for too long. Fine, she shouted. Yes, I've been protecting you. She gets to leave and have her high-rise life and her important job, and her 6-figure salary while I stayed here and took care of everything. I was the one who drove you to doctor's appointments when you were having those memory issues last year. I was the one who helped Dad when his back was acting up. I was the one who made sure that everyone remembered birthdays and anniversaries and holidays. And what did I get for it? Nothing, while she got to be the successful one, the important one, the one everyone's supposed to be proud of. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Memory issues. I looked at Mom confused. What memory issues? I asked. Mom looked uncomfortable. It was nothing serious. Just some confusion with dates and names. The doctor said it was stress-related. When did this happen? Last spring, Dad said quietly. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because you were busy with your big promotion, Greta said bitterly. Because you always have something more important going on than family problems. I never knew she had health issues because no one told me. I said, and I could hear my voice getting louder. How was I supposed to be there for something I didn't know about? Because you don't call enough, because you don't visit enough, because you've made it clear that your life in Boston is more important than anything happening here. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you came home for a regular weekend? Not Christmas, not Thanksgiving, not some special occasion. When's the last time you just came home because you missed us? The question hit me hard because I couldn't answer it. I couldn't remember the last time I'd come home just to visit without some holiday or family event as an excuse. I work 70 hours a week, I said. I'm building a career. I thought you understood that. I understand that you made a choice, Greta shot back. And I understand that I made a different one. I chose to stay. I chose to be here for Mom and Dad when they needed me. I chose to put family first. And I chose to build something for myself. That doesn't make me a bad person. No, but it makes you absent. And absent people don't get to complain when they're not included in things. Stop it, Mom said suddenly, her voice cutting through our argument. Both of you, just stop. We turned to look at her, and I was shocked to see tears streaming down her face. I never asked anyone to sacrifice their dreams for me, she said. Greta, I never wanted you to give up your life to take care of me. And Avery, I never wanted you to feel like you had to choose between success and family. But someone had to step up, Greta said, her voice breaking. Someone had to be responsible. Why? Mom asked. Why did someone have to give up everything? Why couldn't we have figured out a way for both of you to have the lives you wanted? Dad cleared his throat. I think I owe everyone an apology, he said. I made assumptions about what Avery wanted. I thought because she didn't come home often, she didn't care about being included in family things. I thought her success meant she'd outgrown us. I never outgrew you, I said quietly. I just learned to succeed without you. There's a difference. What do you mean? I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. I mean that for years I felt like I had to choose between being successful and being accepted by this family. Every achievement felt like I was proving I was different from you instead of proving I was worthy of your love. So I stopped trying to bridge that gap. I focused on building a life where I felt valued and appreciated because I couldn't figure out how to feel that way here. But we are proud of you, Mom said. I've always been proud of you. Then why didn't it feel that way? Mom looked at Greta, then at Dad, then back at me. I think, she said slowly, because we stopped talking to each other and started talking about each other. She was right. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being a family and started being a collection of people with opinions about each other. Greta had been telling Mom and Dad what I was thinking. I'd been making assumptions about what they wanted. Dad had been protecting Mom from conflicts that maybe didn't need protecting from. I filtered things, Greta admitted quietly. When you called, when you sent gifts, when you tried to include us in your life, I told them what I thought they needed to hear, not necessarily what you actually said. Why? Because I was angry, because it felt like you got to be the success story, while I got to be the caretaker. Because every time Mom talked about how proud she was of your accomplishments, it felt like my sacrifices didn't matter. Emily, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, spoke up for the first time. Can I say something? We all turned to look at her. I've been watching this family for months now, and I've been working with Avery for even longer, and I think you're all missing something important. What's that? Mom asked. You're not competitors. You're not enemies. You're people who love each other but have terrible communication skills. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Emily had a way of cutting through drama with uncomfortable truth. Avery, she continued, you're one of the most caring, supportive people I know. The woman who mentors me every week is not someone who doesn't care about family. She's someone who cares so much that she's learned to protect herself from getting hurt. She turned to Greta. And Greta, everything you've described sounds like love. Inconvenient, overwhelming, sometimes resentful love, but love nonetheless. You stayed because you care. That's not a weakness. So, what do we do? Ethan asked. He'd been silent through most of this, but now he looked around the room at all of us. How do we fix this? I don't know if we can, I said honestly. There's been a lot of damage. There's been a lot of misunderstanding, Mom corrected. And misunderstandings can be fixed if everyone's willing to try. Are we willing to try? Dad asked. I looked around the room at my family. Really looked at them. Greta exhausted and defensive, but still fighting for what she thought was right. Dad, uncomfortable and out of his depth, but trying to hold everyone together. Ethan young and hopeful and wanting us all to get along. Mom heartbroken, but determined to fix what felt broken. And Emily, who'd risked her relationship with my brother to make sure I knew the truth. I want to try, I said. But things have to change. We can't keep doing this dance where everyone makes assumptions about what everyone else wants. We have to actually talk to each other. I agree, Mom said. From now on, if there's something happening in this family, everyone gets told directly. No more filtering, no more assumptions. And I need to try harder, I admitted. I need to visit more. I need to be present for the regular stuff, not just the emergencies and holidays. We all need to try harder, Greta said, and for the first time all day she sounded like my sister instead of my adversary. I'm sorry I kept you away from family things. I thought I was protecting Mom, but I was really just protecting my own feelings. And I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to choose between success and family, Dad said to me. That was never what we wanted. Ethan, who had been listening to all of this with growing understanding, finally spoke up. You know what? I think we should try family therapy, like actual professional help, because this conversation needed to happen years ago, and maybe having someone neutral to help us communicate would be good. The suggestion hung in the air for a moment. Family therapy, the idea that we needed outside help to figure out how to love each other properly. I think that's a good idea, Mom said finally. Really? Greta looked surprised. Really, I want us to fix this, all of us, together. And if that means learning how to be a family again with professional help, then that's what we'll do. I felt something shift in my chest. Hope, maybe, or just the possibility of hope. There's one more thing, I said, reaching for the music box I'd set down on the conference table. I brought you a birthday gift. I handed Mom the carefully wrapped box, and she smiled as she opened it. When she saw the music box, her face lit up with recognition and joy. "Oh, Avery!" she breathed, winding the key and watching the tiny ballerina spin to the tune of Fiancée. "It's beautiful. It's just like the one I had when you were little." I remembered how much you loved it, how you used to play it for me when I couldn't sleep. "I still have that one somewhere," she said, tears in her eyes. "Even though it's broken." "Maybe we can get it fixed," I suggested. "The old one and the new one together." Mom looked up at me, understanding the metaphor. I'd like that. I'd like that very much. And for the first time in 6 months, maybe for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Sometimes, the family that's supposed to love you unconditionally is the one that needs to learn how to love you properly. What do you think about Avery's choice to fight for her place in the family? Have you ever felt excluded by people who were supposed to support you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button for more real family drama that'll make you think twice about your own relationships.